I'm giving you one example. How did this fieldwork change my perspective? When I was participating in the excavation of the site of Telhara, it's a ancient Buddhist site. Now here on the day of Ramnami, so a big puja took place to whom it was offered. So there were two sculptures of Buddha in Bhumi Spars Mudra. Almost 500 persons have gathered for that puja. And this Buddha, he was worshipped with all rituals, sloka, as a sculpture of Hanumanji. I would not say they are fake historians. They use a particular kind of source.
Or maybe don't they know everything, but they know how to interpret it and what to say and what not to say.
They used Sanskrit. They worshipped Indian gods and goddesses. Vishnu, Shiva was the most prominent deity. Now these are the basic facts. And from these basic facts, you try to look into different kind of questions. Say for example, one question which many ask, why did Hinduism survive in this area for such a long time?
History is often taught as dates, dynasties, and decline. But real history lives in institutions, beliefs, and everyday social life, in how people worship, trade, migrate, and coexist. Today's guest is historian who has spent decades looking at religion not as dogma but as a lived social process. Professor Birendra Nath Prasad teaches at Jawaharlal Nehru University and is among the foremost scholars working on social history of Buddhism, Hindu traditions, and Jainism, and the intersection of India and Southeast Asia history. But before the books, conferences, and citations, there was a child, a student, and a mind that chose to ask why instead of what. So today we explore the journey of Dr. Birendra Nath Prasad. We welcome him. Sir, welcome to the podcast. So, sir, we will start with very start.
Thank you, Verma ji.
Much before JNU and much before the academia, where did your life begin and what kind of environment shaped you as a child?
Sir, I was born and brought up at Barauni district, Begusarai, Bihar. That time it used to be quite a rural center, but much of my upbringing that took place at my Nanihal, my Nanaji's ghar, house, that was even more a rural area, Sakarpura in Begusarai district. So from class first to, you may say, class 7th or 8th, I studied at a village school at Sakarpura, interacted with village people. So more or less, I am a product of that particular village. I developed most of my worldview there. Later, I came to my own home with my father's home, and there I had some part of my schooling. So, in a way, I am a product of rural Bihar, and I developed much of my mindset, my worldview, everything
Yes.
from what I observed in the villages of Bihar. Later, I took higher education, plus two, I did from RMLS College, Muzaffarpur, and then history honors from JD College, Begusarai. From there, I prepared for JNU entrance exam for admission to Center for Historical Studies, JNU. So I got admitted after passing the All India level test, and then I did my master's in history, a specialization in ancient history. I was the topper of the batch there. Then MPhil and PhD I did from the same center. I began my teaching career at Assam University. There I taught for 6 years, between end of 2004 to end of 2009, and then I taught at BBAU University, Lucknow, for almost 10 years. In 2017 October, I moved to JNU, and since then I have been teaching at the Center for Historical Studies, JNU. At JNU, I teach diverse papers like Economic History of India. I also teach Urban History of India, but my primary focus is on two papers. First is Puranic and Tantric Religion, which is basically a social history of Hinduism. second, third century AD onwards. And then I also teach history of Southeast Asia, where I see the expansion of Indian culture, Indian religions, Hinduism, Buddhism. And I have also looked, when I was in Lucknow, I was teaching history of the Dalits from ancient times to the contemporary one, contemporary period. So I have been tracking that theme also. And in fact, to work on this Buddhist revival, I was offered some academic affiliations in top five global universities. But due to one factor or other, I could not go. But I'm continuing with the same theme and hope to come out with a full-fledged
So,
monograph
starting
on
from
that theme
your
as well in
being as a
future.
young student, was history your natural subject from childhood or it developed later?
In class 7th, my father gifted me a copy of संस्कृति के चार अध्याय by Ramdhari Singh Dinkar ji. You know that, and that is my first encounter with non-syllabus history writing. It's written in very lucid Hindi, where everybody can understand. So even a class 7 boy could understand that book. So that was the beginning of a long journey. In fact, much of interest developed from that book, and later I started reading other kind of books also. So it was gradual. It did not come suddenly. In fact, my plus two was in with physics, chemistry, math. So my family wanted me to go to engineering line, and friends wanted me to go to UPSC line.
So, when did you realize, sir, कि history is my subject? Or, I mean, like as you have said, the era you are talking about, we have gone through that era, and if you are not studying science, it was like a biggest like.
You are considered to be a fool, non-competent, that you don't want to compete with the best. But after plus two, I decided that I would be doing history honors and I would be trying to make a career in this field.
So that was parents' wish and will that
Yeah,
you had to honor.
yeah. And also some basic, familiarity with science, I think is essential. At least up to plus two level, one should have that much mathematics, that much physics, that much chemistry. I scored good marks. I scored distinction in mathematics. It was around 80%. And scoring 80% from Bihar intermediate board, it's not an easy task. But that was not my natural calling. I honored my father to learn some basics of science and
Okay.
mathematics. So I did that, but history was my natural calling.
Okay, I mean that's a great point, sir. You have said that even if you are going to history or any other subject, science is very much important, and you should have at least basic knowledge of science till your 10th and 12th. That's really very good insight. So then you move to your history in from your graduation side. Then you pursued MA, MPhil, and PhD, as you said, from JNU. So, can you tell us? I mean, when you did MA from, I mean, that was also from history, MA?
Yeah, history was also, I got admitted to Center for Historical Study, JNU.
Mhm.
That time, some of the best teachers in history, they were manning CHS, like Professor B.D. Chattopadhyaya, my PhD supervisor, then Himanshu Prabhare, Professor Sabyasachi Bhattacharya. He was one of the best known historians of economic history of modern India. So many great teachers were there. Training at the master's level at CHS that time used to be quite rigorous. Every month you had to write around two tutorials in which you would be given 10, 12 books to read, review, and then you have to write in around 3,000 words, and then you would be given 20 minutes to present your case. A tutorial group would be there with 4, 5 students, and the professor would be sitting with you. So in 20 or 30 minutes, you would summarize or what you have written. Others will ask you questions. You will ask questions from other. The professor would be asking you questions. So that was the beauty of CHS at that time. That the tutorial system trained us to look into the same issue through multiple lenses. I mean, when I am writing something on the, say, for example, aspect of Hinduism in Southeast Asia, my perspective would be my perspective. Others may not be having the same perspective. So others may be asking you question, and then I would also be asking questions. And professor would be putting penetrative questions on all of you. So it is through that we learn to build our case, defend our case, attack others. So one of the things you must have seen that JNU students, particularly CHS students, they do particularly well in the field of journalism. And that is the uh, training we impart here.
Ji.
That is one of the fundamental things
So,
in that aspect.
I mean, as you have already mentioned that in class seventh, Ramdhari Singh Dinkar ji, that was a turning moment when you started non-textual, I mean, non-textual books and out of the syllabus. But after getting into JNU or in graduation time, was there any particular teacher, book, or moment that actually totally changed that how you look at the history or look at the past, or I have to dedicate my life to history?
Well, the question of dedicating life to history is secondary. The thing is that I had to earn a livelihood, a career. So that would come through passing JRF on it and then trying for an academic job. So it was more a kind of calling in career, a career calling. So this encounter with the past and its continuing relevance in the present and its significance for the future. That is something in which I was always interested. Of course, there were some teachers at college level, at JNU level. Uh, I would like to name particularly at JNU Dr. Himanshu Prabhare. She is one of the best known historians of maritime history of India. She was quite instrumental in shaping my academic personality, and she inculcated a habit of going away from the known path. Like maritime history, you are taking a ship, you are aware of the INS Kaudinya tradition just now that our Sanjeev Sanyal sir has landed to Muscat on a ship built totally through ancient Indian technological scales and using just the power of the wind, just through sailing. No motor, nothing used, just harnessing the power of wind. He has reached there. So these are very difficult journeys. And it was through reading our maritime history that this uh, habit of going to the unknown, exploring the unknown, that came into my mind. And that also brought me to the study of Southeast Asia. In fact, I'm teaching that paper, I'm editing books, I'm in the process of writing a monograph on the history of that book, particularly the history of Hinduism in that area.
So, are you talking about this INS Condivia?
Yeah, I'm talking about INS
Hmm.
Kaundinya. Kaundinya, there is a legend in Southeast Asia. Chinese, not just legend, in fact, Chinese chronicles, they record that around 2nd century AD, there was a Brahmin from India, Kaundinya, and he was on a trading mission to most probably to China through Southeast Asia. And around the southern coast of Cambodia, his ship was pirated. He was captured, he was brought to the shore, and that time Chinese sources record that local society was in quite underdeveloped situation. So their people did not even know the use of cloth. Chinese sources record that they used to work naked, all men and women. And here Kaudinya, when he was captured, he was brought to the shore and he was married to the daughter of the local chief. This daughter was given the name of Soma, and together Kaundinya and Soma they established the first Hindu dynasty of Southeast Asia, and that was the beginning of a long process of a spread of Hinduism in Southeast Asia. You would be surprised to know that a Hindu king was ruling in
Okay.
Vietnam as late as 1832. So that is the history of that area, and I'm interested in the history of.
Just a few minutes back, you again said that there used to be interpretations by different students and then teachers. So the one question, that does interpretation matters as much as evidence, or evidence matters in history?
Well, that's a very old debate. See, some basic facts remain the same, but how you interpret, how you stitch a narrative out of these basic facts, that is what historians do. With the same set of sources, same set of database, they try to look into different kind of questions. When your questions change, your interpretations would
Hmm.
also change. Like I just gave you the
Hmm.
example of Vietnam. There was an ancient state called Champa. Champa, original Champa was in Bhagalpur area of Bihar, Eastern Bihar, and that area used to be the starting point of voyages to Southeast Asia. At Champa, that is Bhagalpur, you would take a ship, cross the Ganga, come to Tamarlipti area, south of Calcutta, and from there your ship would cross the Bay of Bengal, you would reach to different parts of Southeast Asia. So founders of this particular state in Southeast Asia, Champa, they had a memory of their original voyage from Champa area, Bihar. And here they were in existence from at least 350 AD to through ups and downs till 1832 or so.
Hmm.
Now, how do you interpret it? This is the basic fact. And they had Sanskritic names. They used Sanskrit, they worshipped Indian gods and goddesses, Vishnu, Shiva was the most prominent deity. Now, these are the basic facts. And from these basic facts, you try to look into different kind of questions. Say, for example, one question which many ask, why did Hinduism survive in this area for such a long time? Now you have limited set of sources, limited set of database. What you do that you read them, you also read the database of neighboring areas.
Hmm.
You also read Chinese chronicles. Now it's a kind of combination. So one person may be having one set of answers. One person may be having another set of answers. So this is what now this question, what is more important? Narrative or data.
Hmm.
Now I think that both are interdependent on each other. You cannot totally ignore one while building the other. Your narrative would be zero without data. Your data
Hmm.
without a broader narrative would have
True.
not much
That is
meaning.
why we always see
So they are
contradiction in
interdependent.
history. There is a section of historians who say history in a different way. Like there are many historians who even firmly say that Ramayana and Mahabharata are totally stories, myth. And there are historians who prove that Ramayana and Mahabharata was there and it is our Ithihas. So that is why I think.
Ramayana tradition is quite strong, even in Southeast Asia, in Cambodia, in Vietnam, in Indonesia, even in
Hmm.
Thailand. You know that the current ruling king, he traces his origin to Rama.
Hmm.
In fact, all the kings of Thailand, they bear the surname Rama. So uh, these are also facts. But some historians would interpret it in a particular way. Ultimately, history is not about what exactly was there in the past, but how you look into that past. So history is always contemporary. History is always has some influence of what you are witnessing today and what kind of future you
True.
want to have
True.
for yourself,
That's
for your
true.
community, for your
When
nation.
I was looking at your sir history and your work, we saw that you were involved in archaeology, inscriptions, arts, economy. So you study history as a social institution, not just a history or for political motives. So why you felt this is a better approach to study history?
Well, it's one of the approach, not the better approach. In history, you don't, I mean, modern historians, they don't study the individual as such. They study the society of which that particular individual was the product. A man functions in a society. His upbringing, his social background, his family background, his religious background, the kind of experiences he had in a particular society, they all shape up his personality. So we study society. History is basically a study of society of which individuals are product. Now there is a long debate which is more important, individual or his circumstances. I will not go into that detail. But the thing is that even I study religion as a social phenomenon. Religion has some aspect which only a devotee can express within his mind. But as a discipline, history has some limitations. Historians basically deal with written material or material remains of the past. Now, these two things may not be forthcoming in every case. Like today, say for example, if a child goes to appear for his IIT entrance exam tomorrow, what kind of prayer he does in the morning in his mind or his parents do in the morning, that would never be recorded in written form. Or if I go to a pilgrimage site, what do I pray? It is not recorded in a pilgrimage form. It is not recorded in a written form. So as a historian, I would be totally on a blind spot. But when I study pilgrimage as a historian, what would I like to see? How many persons have come from abroad? How many persons have come from great distances? Why did they come? Have they left any written record, like any inscription, anything? On the basis of this, we try to reconstruct the social history from which social background, from which economic background people are coming, why they are coming. So, as a social historian of religion, historian of social history of religion, we are able to scratch only the surface of the thing. What is going on in the subconscious of that particular devotee, of that particular pilgrim, it is very, very difficult to know. But that is the limitation of our discipline that we have to deal with. Mostly written sources or material artifacts, which may not be forthcoming in every case. So in that case, there is of course some limitations of our work, our approach, but that is one of the approaches of history. And now this approach gives you insights on so many things which is not forthcoming in the case of if you study just the textual history of religion. Say, for example, take the case of Nalanda, Nalanda Mahavihar. Now, what do we generally know? That it's a Buddhist site, that it was a Buddhist university, about the bhikshu from all parts of Asia used to come here. But if you look into the inscriptions, if you look into art forms, if you look into sculptures, now Hindu sculptures of Hindu deities have been found in hundreds at this particular site. And they have been found even from the cells, rooms of Bauddha bhikkhus. They were worshipping them inside their own room within the Mahavihar. Or take the case of a splendid sculpture of Nagaraj. Now that sculpture is believed to be the tutelary deity of Nalanda Mahavihar. Now who was donating that sculpture? A Brahmin Mahayana Upasak from Brahmin background. He was given the honor of installing that tutelary deity of the Mahavihar. Now, these kind of examples give you a different kind of perspective than what you see totally through sectarian textual traditions. So this is where lived historians or his lived religion that matters. Like for example, in Bodh Gaya area, Mahabodhi temple, you would find the son of a Murtikar donating a sculpture of Panchamukhi Sivalinga and constructing a shrine for that particular Sivalinga. What for? For the welfare of Hasnataka, that is Buddhist monks, residing within the Mahavihar, Bodh Gaya. Or you would find Bodh Bhikshus presiding over the ritual ceremony of installation of Hindu deities within the Mahavihar. So these are the examples of lived religion which needs to be studied. Textual tradition would be open only to a few. Rate of literacy would be quite low in the past. So only a very few persons, a very segment, elite class would have access to the written word. But lived religion may be something different than what we see in purely textual traditions. And that has been one of my study areas in
You
India
have,
and
sir,
Southeast Asia.
participated in excavations and village to village archaeological surveys around the Nalanda, as you mentioned about Nalanda. So, please tell us about this experience of having village to village archaeological surveys, excavations, and how did you, this field work change understanding of text and theories?
I'm giving you one example. How did this fieldwork change my perspective? I would rather give you two examples. First is when I was participating in the excavation of the site of Telhara. It's a ancient Buddhist site near Nalanda, some 30 kilometers or so away from Nalanda Mahavihar. Now here on the day of Hanuman Jayanti, Ramnami, sorry. So a big puja took place in the village temple. Now which puja, to whom it was offered? So there were two sculptures of Buddha in Bhumi Asparsa Mudra, dating back to the Pala period around 10th century AD. Now what I found quite interesting is that almost 500 persons have gathered for that puja, local villages. It was a small village. And this Buddha, he was worshipped with all rituals, sloka, and all things, puja and all things, as a sculpture of Hanumanji. People knew that, educated people knew that he is Buddha, but even then he received full-fledged puja as Hanuman on the day of Ram Navami. Villagers would come, touch his feet, offer flowers, and they would say Jai Bajrang Bali or something similar to that, and they would go away. Now another example I gave, that is a place called Rukmini Asthan, around 2 kilometers away from Nalanda Mahavihar. And here there is a big, rather I would say the biggest stone sculpture of Bihar, almost 12 feet in height. It's a magnificent sculpture of the Buddha.
Okay.
Now he is worshipped as Rukmini Mai. And local villagers have different kind of legends, particularly when particularly for newly wed couples. They would come, they would worship Buddha, who is now Rukmini Mai. They would pray to this Rukmini Mai, and it is believed that this Rukmini Mai is quite generous in granting progeny, children, to the newly married couple. So your marriage would not be complete if you don't go to pray to this Rukmini Mai. Now, as a historian of religion, as a student of history of religion, I was initially shocked. What's going on? But gradually I realized that the sculpture has survived. Even active worship has survived. But the perception of local people regarding the nature, regarding the character of that particular deity has fundamentally changed. Now people talk about the decline of Buddhism. From that moment onwards, when I visited these two sites, I came with the concept of transformation of Buddhism, metamorphosis of Buddhism. Buddha is there, Tara is there, so many other Buddhist sculptures are there. But they are worshipped in a different way. Now, why they are worshipped in the different way? Why they have become Rukmini Mai or Hanumanji or Mih Baba or Goraiya Baba, village protector deities. Now, this is something you need to study, and this requires a reading of both written sources and local traditions. And I would suggest to every aspiring historian, every student of history. In history, we basically study society. And unless you know your contemporary society, you
Hmm.
would not be able to study your past society. As a historian, you are not, of course, archival work, library work, they are important. But as a historian, it is more important for you to go to villages, to go to sightseeing, to go to, society, broader society, try to understand their working,
Hmm.
try to understand the mechanics of social functioning.
So one curiosity, sir, came out of it. The sculpture of Buddha is quite different. I mean, the visibility is different. How someone can infuse Lord Buddha as Hanumanji or Rukmini? I mean, totally the gender change. So I mean, it should be visible clearly कि he is Buddha, he is not Hanumanji. I mean, in every sculpture we see Hanumanji with a different trait. Uh, uh, a mouth of a monkey and then a tail. Maybe it's a.
So ultimately, I came to your channel. A Bhakt creates his Bhagwan.
Hmm,
So your Bhagwan is what you want him to
hmm,
be. Some legend would be constructed that Rukmini Mai, she decided to be a man for one day or so. Now a legend would be local villagers would put the legend that this Rukmini Mai is especially proficient in granting you a son. If you worship, a newly married couple worships him, this Buddha, sorry, this Rukmini Mai, then there is a greater chance that you would be blessed with a son. So now ultimately it is human mind which imagines its Bhagwan and worshipped ones in different worlds.
So I think 400 years back तुलसीदास जी already cleared that जाकी रही भावना जैसी प्रभु मूरत ही थी वैसी. जी,
Yeah,
very
yeah.
true. That's really a great insight, sir. We understood about history. Now, one thing about your teaching career, you have taught, as you have said, you have taught in many universities, central universities. So, some moment during your teaching career with interaction with the students, which changed your perspective for history, or which had some significance remark in your memory that is still you carry with you.
The most memorable memories are from my previous Lucknow job. There, this university, it has a particular character. 50% seats are reserved for SC/ST. So in any given year, any class would be have around 80% Dalit students. And they would be from the most deprived sections of society. They would be, in many cases, they would be first generation learners, or their father working as a Raj Mistri or coolie. Even we used to get students from that background, that kind of background. And there, the medium of instruction was English. And almost 90% of our students, they are coming from purely Hindu medium background, from the most rural parts of Uttar Pradesh and at the adjoining areas. Teaching them used to be a kind of very, very challenging task in English medium. For initially 2, 3 months, they would not be able to make any sense of my lecture or anyone else's lecture. Many of them would be depressed that we are living, we are unable to cope up with the linguistic demands here. And working with them, keeping them motivated, keeping them convinced of their own ability to overcome this linguistic barrier. That used to be a big challenge. And thankfully, for 10 years or so, I did that with some satisfaction. And many of them would come to national universities like JNU or DU. They would excel. In fact, some of them have even availed scholarships to study in the noted universities of UK and USA. That is a kind of satisfying thing for me as a teacher. I treat that as my biggest success story, and that's that in JNU in CHS we get the cream of India. So it's not very difficult to teach them. In fact, many moments they teach us, they ask us so probing questions, so fundamental questions that one occasionally needs to revisit the whole approach.
So there are two contradictions. But first, my curiosity is ki this is really very decent approach of government that they have opened college and university for the most deprived societies, and they made this structure in a way. But then why they compromised on the language? Once they understood that the most deprived societies will come, as you have said, that maybe the first learners of their lineage, then why English as a medium? Why not Hindi as a medium?
Well, we allowed them to write their answer scripts in Hindi, but the thing is that ultimately they have to compete with the world. So they have to learn. There is no way out. So
Books.
lectures would be in English.
Hmm.
They would read English uh, language material. But many of them who are unable to rise up to that level, they would write their answers in Hindi medium. We would accept that. So there was no problem in that approach as such. But the thing is that most of them improved.
Yes,
And you know that today English is the language of power. Unless you want to share in power economy, in knowledge economy, you have to learn.
true. So there was a
That is what
different
we try to
challenge
do.
in Lucknow, and there was a different challenge altogether in JNU. There, yeah. So as you mentioned that there were more learned students than
Say, oh yeah.
professors. So how did JNU life changed your perspective?
JNU, it's a research university, and I'm grateful to this particular university. Uh, it transformed me as a student when I was a student here. As a teacher, also, basically, you would be having some PhD scholar who would be working on Karnataka, somebody would be working on Assam, someone in Rajasthan,
Hmm.
someone someone on Bengal, somebody on Andhra. So on any given year, you would have five students from five different parts of India working, writing their PhD thesis on five different parts of India. And to be able to supervise their thesis, you yourself
True.
would be
Hmm.
required to read the history of that area.
Hmm.
So we are never free here in that sense. Many of them would be writing their MA dissertations on some particular part of India. So JNU, it's a National University of India, and it is giving us the opportunity, rather forcing us to learn the history of different parts of India. And that is giving us a much bigger picture. That is helping me to evolve as a more complete teacher, as a better teacher, as a better historian. Plus, here you also need to teach history of Southeast Asia or non-Indian history courses. So your perspective is always wider.
So one question as a teacher, what responsibility does a history teacher carry in a country like Bharat? What you have understood is my main responsibility as a teacher.
See, except China, India is probably the only
True.
continuing civilizational state in the world. So we are the legatees of a great civilization, and we are teaching about this great civilization. Of course, like any complex civilization, India too had its own contradictions. The philosophy of Vedanta and the social practice of untouchability would be surviving simultaneously. To give you just one example, but India as a whole, Indian civilization as a whole, one thing I liked about it is that it never imposed a single answer to any particular question. It was always in the mind of ekam satya viprah bahuda vadanti, or let noble thoughts come to us from all sides. So here you have philosophies like Syadavad, seven possibilities. There is no single answer. There is no single path of salvation. There is no single true God and all others are false God. Not like that. So our civilization promoted this kind of plurality of thought process. And as a historian, it's our duty to ensure that the same tradition is inculcated among the young minds and they carry forward the same message to their future works. As a civilization, it's essential that this civilization should survive, take pride in its roots, look into its shortcomings with a dispassionate mind, and tries for honest improvements in the shortcomings. So, this is what we try to communicate as a historian, and this is what we expect that future generation would be carrying forward the same
So
kind of
one more
tradition.
question. I think you have around 20 years of experience of teaching. So in these 20 years of experience, have you felt
Yeah,
any change
yeah.
in the students in perspective to attention, context, or confidence?
Well, every as we are approaching our 50s, about to enter into that age group. So now we are Bujurg, technically. So every Bujurg feels that there is a decadence after him. पुरानी पीढ़ी इतनी अच्छी थी अब के लड़के पढ़ते नहीं थे but of course not in that way, not in that spirit, but I am telling you a peculiar problem or peculiar issue we are facing as a student, as a teacher, as a student. In our generation, on any given day, you would be spending minimum 10 hours in a library, in JNU library, to write your tutorials. Now, what is the situation now? That first, this culture of reading in the library, it's gradually vanishing. The people prefer to read online. So that was the case some 5 years back. Now the worst thing is that now this is a reels generation. You want everything in a hurry. In 2 minutes, you need to get all information. Within 5 minutes, you would try to, formulate solution to every kind of problem. Or worse than that, you would use artificial intelligence. But life does not move like that. There is a determined pace of evolution. I appeal to the younger generation that books of the library, they are waiting for you. Reading a book, writing notes about them, writing notes just in the corner of the book, you would find the comments of the previous generation. So books are waiting for you. No AI, no laptop would compensate the
Very true.
kind of knowledge you would get in a library. Go sit in the library, see others studying the same thing, discuss with them, communicate with them. You would also improve your own understanding. You would also be able to uh, communicate your own perspectives to others. So go to the libraries, read them, plus develop your communication skills. If you are reading, make notes, write your own analysis. Don't depend on computer and AI and Grammarly and other things for everything. It's our responsibility that our mind, human mind, is forced to retain those kind of skills, which I am afraid that we may lose in the age of artificial intelligence.
So, what Dr. Professor Sir has said, I think this is a good message to all our viewers that please go to libraries, read, study, and what Sir is technically saying is actually a scientific reason. When you study, you put all your senses towards a book, not a digital screen, and then you compel to scribe on it as well or write your notes. Then your muscle memory also works. So reading and writing both works together, and it definitely creates a different attitude in you than watching a reel or watching a video. Watching video is not a bad thing, but there has to be some limitations to it, as Sir has said. Yeah.
Unless we force our mind to read, make sense of reading, analyze that in our own words, write them in our own words, our mind will gradually lose the ability in a case course of say 50 years or
Yeah.
60 years or 100 years.
And Sir has appealed to the students, especially of the JNU students. So we believe that the students, they have more to write as well, and writing doesn't comes unless until you have not read. So reading is a prerequisite to writing. So if you want to write, you have to read first. When you read 10 books, then maybe you will be able to write one page. So it's very much necessary that you read and then you start writing. That's really a great message, sir. So let's come again to your books and your works. Now, when we are talking about writing, you have also written a lot of books. Archaeology of Religion in South Asia, Rethinking Bihar and Bengal, and many more books. So we would like to know about these books, sir. And what were your, when you were writing these books, who were you thinking? Audiences, facts, evidences, or what?
There were only three things. First was my sources, my database. Second was my mind. And third was my own experiences in the fieldwork. I did not have any predetermined agenda. I did not have any predetermined conclusion. My writings gradually evolved, what kind of sources I got, and what my mind could analyze them in some detail. So it's a professional, unbiased, neutral kind of history writing. I did not try to conceal any particular unpleasant truth, or I did not try to glorify any particular thing which did not deserve this kind of glorification. So it's a professional, neutral work, and that is one of the reason that my works have been reviewed or read about or talked about. So it's a professional
Sir,
work
now when it
without
comes
any
to, I mean, you have
predetermined agenda.
honestly said that your all writings are totally unbiased, but your work is read and cited internationally, Oxford, Europe, Southeast Asia. So, does global recognition change how you see responsibility as an Bharatiya historian, or is there any pressure today to simplify history for popularity? I mean, we always see that there is a biasing from the West. So, do you feel such kind of any pressure on you now?
Sir, if I say you correctly, most of the framework, the situation right now is that Indian universities, even in terms of researches on Indian history, we don't stand anywhere compared to some North American universities or some European universities. The situation now is that they generally provide the framework. We either counter them or corroborate them or we try to fill the
Mhm.
gaps. But the framework generally comes from the West, from that side. Some particular theory developed in, say, Princeton or Chicago or Michigan or Oxford or Cambridge. So that is a sad reality of Indian historical writing now. That earlier we had quite a few scholars who could actually go to the field, go to the site, decipher inscriptions, make a kind of
Mhm.
first-hand history writing. Take the case of R.C. Majumdar. Now, most of his early writings were on Southeast Asia. In fact, in 1922 or so, in the 1920s, he wrote two volumes on the history of Champa in Vietnam. How did he read that? That was not the, how did he do that?
Mhm.
That was not the age of internet. That was not the age of Xerox and all that. In fact, primary scholarship on that area was available only in French language. And based in Dhaka, he did not have much exposure to French language either. So what would he do? He came to Serampur near Calcutta, learned French, developed competence in that language. On the basis of that, he read all secondary literature. Then he went to Vietnam. Many of the inscriptions were deciphered for the first time by him. So that kind of, it was a kind of, our political leaders, they were fighting freedom of struggle in political arena. But historians like R.C. Majumdar, they were fighting this battle in the intellectual arena. R.C. Majumdar or Nilkant Sastri, these kind of historians. Now, sadly, what we see that after 1950s, somehow that kind of rigor or that kind of honesty to work is somewhat gradually came down. In our generation, we are not even 2% of the rigor of great R.C. Majumdar or Nilkant Sastri, and not just me, any other historian of our time. So now, what happens is that in this kind of situation, the framework generally develops in the West, some American university. We adopt them or we corroborate them or we confront them. But the thing is that we are more or less unable to produce our own framework. And that is a sad reality. I hope that in future this situation will gradually change. But this is the reality now. But of course, the world is very small. It used to be very small. Even in say 5th century AD or 3rd century AD, 4th century AD, a Brahmin from Mathura would take a ship, land in some court of Southeast Asia, he would become a Rajpurohit or he would become the Pujari of a particular temple. So world has always been very small and we all live in a connected world. So of course, global citations or global recognition, that does matter. But I wrote more as a kind of Swanta Sukhai for my own satisfaction. It's good that people appreciate it or sometimes they are even critical, but that is part of the job.
So, sir, any solution or suggestion from your side to come over from this sad reality of getting framework from the West?
The first suggestion would be to develop competence in the primary languages of history. Primary languages like Sanskrit, Pali, or Prakrit, or Persian, or Arabic, or our regional languages, vernaculars, Marathi, or Telugu. The sad reality is that much of our students or even our teachers who do research on ancient Indian history, we lack that kind of in-depth knowledge of Sanskrit which our previous generation had. They could edit Sanskrit works, they could translate it. In our generation, this ability is sadly not up to that level. So the first thing would be to develop competence in our primary languages, source languages, which we should take on a mission mode. Of course, we cannot write history in isolation. Ultimately, India was a part of the world. What was happening in West Asia or Southeast Asia or Central Asia, that was all impacting us. So we need to keep the history of those parts also in mind.
Yes, definitely. Now India is moving towards it, but still it will take time, as you said rightly. Sanskrit is very much important, and then still being a polyglot is much more important. Being a historian or in other disciplines, that's very true. So, I mean, it's taking too much of time, sir, but still there are many questions, there are many queries. Like there was one point you said decline of Buddhism, and I think you have word on decline of Buddhism as well.
I'd say that it's a transformation of Buddhism, not decline. See, religion, as I have been saying, is a social phenomenon. If you are connected to society, if society is patronizing you in one way or another, if you have deep connections with society, no matter whatever the adverse circumstances,
Mhm.
a particular religion would not decline. Like take the case of Jainism. It faced equal persecution, almost equal, than what Buddhism did in many parts of Asia. But it did not disappear. It had a different kind of linkages with some devotees, with the practicing Jainas. But take the case of,
Hmm.
say, for example, Buddhism, or take the case of Bangladesh. It was one of the strongholds of Buddhism, but it provided one of the most fertile grounds for conversion to Islam. Or take the case of Afghanistan or Pakistan. They were great centers of Buddhism. Again, there you see that they could not survive Islamic rule for more than two, 300 years.
Hmm.
But take the case of Hinduism, it did survive. Why did it survive? Because its nature was different from what you see in the case of Buddhist monasteries or Buddhism. Buddhism, for its survival, was
Hmm.
dependent on survival of its bhikshu tradition. But that is not the case with Hinduism because it was a religion without any particular rigid form. If your temples are destroyed,
Very true.
you could worship your deities in a open air shrine. When they are destroyed, sculptures are destroyed, you could worship them within your home. Even if that is not
Hmm.
allowed in some particular case, then you can do Manas Puja. Or you would have a concept of Apada Dharma, that in emergency, all things which were not allowed in the past, they would be allowed now.
True.
So it has great adaptability. It has great capacity to change to the changing times.
Just to add to this, sir, I was, talking to one of the great saint, and I said ki sometimes there is a possibility that you don't have any Shivlinga near you. After taking bath, I have a habit to, do Jal Abhishek to Shivlinga. So he gave me very nice suggestion. I mean, just when you said this, it just came to my mind. Ki doesn't matter if Shivlinga is there. You imagine your thumb as Shivlinga. Just call Shiva on your thumb and do the Jal Abhishek. It is done. That was so simple for me. So flexibility.
Yeah. So one of the factors behind the survival of Hinduism was that it had great elasticity. And then it had the great capacity of ensuring a kind of continuity with the past. Like take the case of Hinduization of Southeast Asia. Before the spread of Hinduism in that area, many parts of Southeast Asia had a tradition of cult of mountains. You would be worshipping the summit of one mountain or other. And there, this cult of Shiva has spread. Why? Shiva Giris. Shiva is the Parvateswar, Lord of Mountains. Or take the case of cult of Durga Mahishasur Mardini. That was also quite popular in much of Southeast Asia. Now, before the arrival of Hinduism in that area, many parts of Southeast Asia had the tradition of ritual sacrifice of buffaloes. Buffalo as the sign of evil, as some evil force. Now that merged quite gradually and quite peacefully with the cult of Mahishasur Mardin. Or take the case of Indonesia, Java. Here you have a great volcano, Mount Merapi, and it's an active volcano. It erupts from time to time. Now, around 900 AD or so, it was apparent that this volcano would explode with ferocity in near future. And what the local kings would do, they started constructing the temples of Shiva in the foothills of this particular volcano or on the summit of that particular volcano. Why Shiva only? Why not Vishnu? Why not Durga Mahishasur Mardini? Now Shiva as Girish, Shiva as the Lord of Mountains, plus Shiva as Bhasmi Bhut, Shiva with Bhasma on his body. The people believe that Shiva is the Lord of Mountains, Shiva Girish, so he has the power to control these volcanoes. So now this is the mechanism of expansion of Hinduism, that you don't impose any particular thing, any particular structure. Whatever was there, you simply build on that. The local traditions would survive, but within an overall Hindu fold. So cult of mountain survive, but they would merge with they would be amalgamated in the cult of Shiva. Cult of ritual sacrifice of buffalo would survive, but they would be just take the form of cult of Mahishasur Mardin. So it has great elasticity, great adaptability, and that was one of the factors in its spread both within India and
True, sir.
Southeast Asia.
So now, I mean, we are taking too much of your time, but I have last question about your public debates or public discourses. We have seen you in many news discussions, TV debates. When should a historian intervene in a public discourse, and when is detachment necessary? I mean, is it does it make any value being a historian get into public discourses and debates? And how is your yeah?
We all live in a society. We are a student of society. We study society. So occasionally we need to take a position, particularly when thing is something is totally fabricated, and it is fabricated to suit a particular kind of agenda. Like take the case of so many new narratives that actually it were the Brahmins who burnt the destroyed the Nalanda Mahavihar. Now somebody who has devoted 20 years of his life in studying Buddhism in Bihar and Bengal, then it was
True.
necessary for me to take a position on that. Somebody simply saying that Hinduism is unable to expand beyond India because it's Varna Jati ridden, then somebody who has, I mean, taught Southeast Asian Hinduism or who has edited books on that particular area, somebody who has supervised PhD thesis on that area, then it becomes necessary
True,
for
sir.
me to take a
I mean, that
position.
is necessary if a true historian like you comes on public debate and discourses. They would be able to bust the myths many fake historians,
I would not say they are fake historians. They use a particular kind of source.
or maybe don't they know everything, but they know how to interpret it and what to say and what not to say.
Huh. They are agenda driven. They are trying to advance a particular kind of agenda.
True, true. Yes, and that is more required, and we congratulate you for appearing into many discourses, and we would wish that you come most and most into these because that is actually required. Because my last question would be ki, I mean, there is a worry today about history. There is a lot of myths, many fake agendas going on. Like I have heard that Ramayana is a myth. Ramayana is a story, and Yudhishthir was inspired by the character of King Ashok. So before Ashok, Mahabharat was not there. It was written as story after King Ashok, inspiring from Ashoka, and it was said by a famous historian.
These epics, they are part of oral tradition. Writing came into picture much later, and even then, rate of literacy was quite low. So you cannot understand a complex civilization like India just on the basis of when a particular thing was put into writing. That may not be a valid approach. But of course, historians have their own agenda, they have on their own narratives.
So, sir, I thank you very much for coming to our podcast and giving so much of your valuable time. But before going, I would, as our parampara, I would request to give a final advice to our young persons who want to study history seriously today.
Keep your eyes open, unbiased. You are there to understand. You are not there to pass a judgment. What kind of sources you get, you interpret them. Develop the competence in primary languages and always have the belief that this is your interpretation is not the final one. Tomorrow a new kind of source may come which may invalidate all our history or force us to look into another particular way. So we are all doing little work that should be unbiased and that should be open to your own questions. What I wrote in 2008, I don't agree with them now after 15 or 20 years. So that kind of honesty everyone should have. That yes, at that particular time, I used that particular kind of source, that kind of particular interpretative skill. So that may change in future. So history is all about understanding. It's not about passing judgments.
True. Sir, thank you very much for coming to our channel.
Thank you, Himanshu ji, and it was a great pleasure to interact with you. Hope to join you in future as well.
This was not a conversation about dates or dynasties. It was about how societies remember, believe, or organize themselves. Professor Birendra Nath's journey reminds us the history, when studied honestly, is not about the past, it is about responsibility in the present. This was the story of Bhakts on Bhakts.com. Namaskar, Jai Hind, Jai Bharat. Keep watching, sharing these stories with your loved ones. Thank you. Dhanyavad.